Good morning, everybody. It's a snowy Wednesday here in Boston. Let's warm you up with an hour of DFS and sports betting advice, aka this little show we call The Sweat. I'm your host, Jessie Coffield. Now, before we jump into football, let's bring in DraftKings contributor Steve Buchanan. Steve, big news. Garrett Cole has reportedly signed a record deal with the Yankees, 9 years, $324 million with an opt-out after 5 years and a full no-trade close. Do you think this was a smart move by the Yankees? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about how these massive multi-year deals can come back and bite you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, maybe in the later part of this contract, maybe they'll start to regret it a little bit. But if you're going to get Garrett Cole, who's in the prime years of his career, he's only 29 years old. This is somebody who just struck out 40% of the batters he faced last season with the Astros in a tough division. If you can go get Garrett Cole, you go out there and get him. I mean, it's an absolutely unbelievable signing. Somebody was going to give him this massive contract, whether it's the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Angels. So the Yankees got their guy.
Are the Yankees now World Series favorites? That's what we got to know.
Yeah, so, this is a team that won 103 games during the regular season with all the injuries that they had last year and no Garrett Cole. Now you're going to add him into the mix. Of course, this makes them World Series favorites. If they can avoid the injury bug unlike they did last year, they're going to have Stanton, they're going to have Judge, they're going to have Sanchez. There's so many huge pieces in the offense, not to mention a solidified ace in the top of that rotation there. So, of course, you have to like them to be the favorites for the World Series.
All right, thanks, Steve. Let's bring in Jeff Ulrich and turn our attention to football. Time
great.
for NFL cover to cover. So will the following teams cover their Week 15 spreads? Texans at Titans. Titans are 3-point favorites. Will they cover, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to go against the Titans and Ryan Tannehill right now. I mean, they've covered in 4 straight games. 3 of them was when they were favored. This Texas secondary and just their defense all around has been looked absolutely putrid. And now you have a red-hot Ryan Tannehill coming into this game. He's getting it done on the ground. He's getting it done through the air. Oh, by the way, the Texans can't stop the run either. And we have Derrick Henry, who's rushed for over 100 yards in 4 straight games. I absolutely love the Titans here. I think I love the Titans in this game. I think the Texans could get walloped in this game, quite frankly. I think there's a lot to like about the Titans here.
Jeff, do you like the Titans to cover here?
Yeah. I can't start the show off by making Steve angry here and disagreeing with him. I'm going to go with the Titans, too. Look, I'm on the Ryan Tannehill train until the wheels come off, and the wheels are not coming off right now. I mean, his level of play obviously aside, I agree. I mean, look, the Texans have taken kind of a step back here. I know they've got 2 big wins, but sandwiched in between those 2 big wins, 2 pretty horrific losses. I mean, when you get blown out by the Denver Broncos at home, there's some question marks coming in, and their rush defense has been an issue lately. They're all the way up to 4.5 yards per carry against. You got Derrick Henry coming in. You've got a banged up secondary here too. And it's interesting to know, Deshaun Watson used to be so good at keeping games within a touchdown. And now 2 times over his last 4 games, the Texans have been blown out. I think that doesn't speak necessarily to Deshaun Watson, but just the state of their team overall. It's kind of being held together. It feels like by glue. I think this is a real tough spot for them to come into Tennessee. I'd love to see this number get under 3, like minus 2.5 before I take Tennessee. But even at 3, I would lean the Titans.
A really fun one here, Jeff. Giants 3.5-point favorites when they host the Dolphins. Can they cover? Dolphins coming off that nail-biter with the Jets.
I mean, I hate this game so much. Just from a betting perspective. I mean, the last thing you want to do is start trusting teams that you can't trust in any area. I'm going to lean the Giants here. I am still. I feel like with Saquon Barkley going up against, one of the weakest rush defenses in the league, the Giants at least have that going for them. Their defense also showed up. They've had some good pass rush over the last month or so, and their rush defense has been good too. So all things considered, the Dolphins, who are they going to have to throw to in this game? A little bit of a pass rush gets going for the Giants. I think that they are going to be able to control this, perhaps even win by a touchdown. I don't really like betting this game, but if I was going to choose a side, I'd go with the Giants.
Steve, you might not like it, but you have to choose.
I have no problem choosing here. Hey, Jeff, who's going to have more passing yards, Eli Manning or Ryan Fitzpatrick? Spare us, because you're going to get it wrong anyway, so you don't need to answer that. The Giants are 1-2 against the spread when they're favored so far this season. The Dolphins 7-6 as underdogs. Are we going to be excited about Eli Manning, who could only complete 50% of his pass attempts against the Eagles, who have one of the worst secondaries in the league? Is he going to do much better against the Dolphins? I don't think so. He did not look good in that game. Thank God for Darius Slayton for saving him, because because he basically had 85% of the passing yards that he had in this game. I don't like the Giants at all. I'll be more than happy to take the Dolphins. No question for me.
All right, another good one here. Eagles favored by 4.5 when they visit the Redskins. Do they cover, Steve?
So the biggest difference for me here is that obviously, the Eagles barely got by the Giants last week, and that was a little bit surprising. But the thing is here with the Redskins, they're going to have trouble running the ball against the Eagles. So if they're going to have to rely on Dwayne Haskins throwing the ball, that's where I kind of get my love here for the Eagles. It's a pretty small spread overall for the Eagles to overcome against a Redskins team that has struggled defensively, struggled so much with that secondary that they have there. I know the Eagles did not look impressive in that game against the Giants, but I think they should be able to overcome the Redskins here, so I'm going to side with the Eagles.
Jeff, who you siding with?
God, again, I can't go with the Eagles. I mean, they're just not a team who's shown over the last month that they're deserving of being 4.5-point favorites on the road. This just reminds me of last week where they were 9-point favorites at home, and they didn't even come close to covering. Washington has played good football over the last couple of weeks. I mean, they really have, keeping it within 5 to Green Bay and actually having like kind of a tiny shot there at the end. And then the week before, they went to Carolina and busted them up. I mean, I think this is a very similar situation. This is a team who's it's a division game. They've been running the ball well. I know Darius Geis is banged up, but Adrian Peterson, Chris Thompson are still there. Their defense has been playing well. They've been getting pressure. And then you have the Eagles who, it's Carson Wentz and Zach Ertz. If they even remotely shut down Zach Ertz in this game, there's no one else to throw to. So I don't really love it, but give me the points here at 4.5. I'm taking the points against the Eagles pretty much in every game right now.
All right, Seahawks at Panthers. Seattle favored by 6. Jeff, what do you think about this one?
Feels like a little bit of a trap game. The Seattle Seahawks are getting bet up already. They're one of the biggest public bets of the week, just coming into Wednesday. So that always worries you a little bit. At the same time, this really does look like a spot where DK Metcalf could get going. Tyler Lockett could get going. This Carolina secondary allowing no names from Atlanta to score like 90-yard touchdowns in the wide receiver position last week. Or sorry, not Atlanta, the Panthers. Right division, wrong team. But it just feels like a spot for Russell Wilson and his receivers to bounce back is what I'm trying to say. On the flip side, Christian McCaffrey has definitely had some good games against Seattle. The Seahawks aren't that great at covering running backs out of the backfield. So I think what worries me the most would just be a backdoor cover. Still, I'm taking the Seahawks in this one. Carolina just feels like their quarterback just has hit a wall. Their defense has kind of hit a wall for sure over the last month. I'm just going to take the better team in Seattle. Hope they cover.
Steve, does Seattle cover?
This is probably the toughest one that we've talked about here. I do like Seattle to cover here. The Carolina Panthers just cannot stop against the run at all. They've been absolutely gashed on the ground, and Chris Carson basically taking that bell cow role now that Rashad Penny is out is going to be a big difference for me here. But I don't want to put the money on the Panthers, but this line just seems just a little bit too high on the Seahawks right now. They're a kind of a hard team to trust. They're only 4-5 against the spread when they're favored so far this season. It's not a number I'm really particularly crazy about taking, but matchup-wise, I do lean with the Seahawks in this one. I'd like to see this line come down a little bit. I don't know if that's what we're going to get, but for now, I'm going to stick with the Seahawks.
All right, good stuff, guys. Baseball, football, basketball is next.
It's Brendan Glasheen in with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. We have ourselves another return game Wednesday night in the NBA. Kawhi Leonard is back in Toronto, where he helped deliver the Raptors their first championship in franchise history. The two-time Finals MVP sat out Monday night's game at the Pacers. Second night of a back-to-back, Leonard nursing a sore left knee. He watched his teammate Paul George silence boos in Indianapolis, the city George spent his first 7 seasons as a pro. George exploded for a season-best 62.75 DraftKings points. George said of the booing, "I feed off it. It's fun. It makes the game that much more fun to compete in." Add his performance to the list of boo silencers this year. Anthony Davis went off for 41 points, 27 in the first half, finishing with more than 61 DK points in his return to New Orleans the night before Thanksgiving. Same night, Kyrie Irving at Boston. No, never mind. Asked how Leonard will be received in the Six, George said exact opposite of how he was in Indiana. Regardless, Kawhi will be fired up to receive not boos, but his championship ring. Plus, he'll want to remind his old squad who they're missing.
Time to take a look at what's going on tonight in the association. Say hello to DK Nation NBA editor Ben Zwyman and RotoWire's Nick Whalen. All right, guys, need you to chase or fade these bets from tonight's 11-game NBA slate. Clippers are 3-point favorites on the road in Kawhi's return to Toronto. Ben, chase or fade, Toronto pulls off the upset.
Yeah, I'm going to chase this. Toronto, they're 9-2 at home this season. The Clippers aren't a very good road team. They're 5-6 on the road. I know the narrative is big with Kawhi coming back, but he's a modest guy. I think he'll be motivated, but this should be a pretty even matchup. And usually when a home team as good as the Raptors is getting points, then yeah, I'm going to lean that way. So yeah, I think the Raps have the size and defenders to deal with guys like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Montrezl Harrell. So yeah, I think the Raptors at least cover in this game. I think it'll be close, but I do think they can pull off the win. The Clippers have been a little erratic lately.
Nick, what do you think? Could Toronto pull off the upset here?
Yeah, I mean, I think they certainly can, and I agree with Ben that they will keep it close, but I'm going to go with the Clippers. I mean, they're just so powerful on both ends of the court on the wing when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are in the lineup. I wouldn't read too much into the Kawhi return narrative, for a couple of reasons. Like Ben mentioned, I mean, I don't think Kawhi Leonard is the type of guy, we just heard that sound clip from Paul George saying, that he fed off of the boos. For one, I don't think Kawhi's going to get booed whatsoever in Toronto. And two, I mean, if there's ever been somebody who, whether he's getting cheered, booed, whether the crowd is completely silent, just isn't affected by it at all, it's Kawhi Leonard. So I think we kind of see the same Kawhi that we see whenever he's out on the court. I don't think that changes much. But I look at the Toronto side, Fred VanVleet, a game-time call for this game. He left the previous game with a knee injury. Kyle Lowry, been a little bit shaky since he returned from his injury. If either of those guys are limited, especially VanVleet, I'm a little bit concerned about that Toronto guard depth. So again, I think it's close, but I'll lean toward the Clippers.
Lakers on the road in Orlando. LeBron James's points total is set at 25.5. Chase or fade that he goes over that number tonight, Nick?
This is really, really tough. I mean, of course, that number is right around his season average. He's been as consistent as ever. But, what concerns me is Orlando plays really, really slowly. They have slipped a little bit on defense. They were up in the top 5 a couple of weeks ago. They're closer to the middle of the pack now. So maybe that helps offset the slow pace. I guess I'll go slightly over. I don't think this is a night where we see 30-plus out of LeBron, but I did watch the Magic play Milwaukee on Monday. I was pretty impressed. I mean, Milwaukee didn't play its best game, but at least Orlando was able to keep it close against what's been pretty much hands down the best team in the league over the last month. So if they can do the same, make this a game where LeBron has to play into the fourth quarter, deep into the fourth, then I think he goes over.
Ben, does LeBron go over 25.5?
Yeah, I'm going to fade this and say that he goes under, actually. Yeah, I mean, if the Lakers blow out the Magic, then, LeBron's probably not going to play as much. They got a tough road trip, the Lakers, right now, and they're going into a matchup on Friday against the Heat, so I think LeBron will want to be rested for that. And yeah, I mean, we've seen Anthony Davis really step up and be the focal point of this offense lately, right? He's coming off 50 points a couple games ago. Both the Magic are a pretty good defensive team, top 10 in defensive rating, and again, they play at a slow pace. So yeah, I think this is a scenario where either it's a blowout game and James doesn't play enough minutes to get to that over, or the Magic are pretty good on defense and the Lakers sort of funnel it to Anthony Davis and he's the one that's sort of picking up a lot of the points. So I'm going to go under here.
Pacers hosting the Celtics in what's essentially a pick'em. So Ben, chase or fade the Pacers win at home?
Yeah, normally I'd be the type of person that would chase this, but the Celtics are just playing way better basketball right now, and they're actually getting healthy, right? They've got wins over the Nuggets and Heat recently. They're a better home team, but Gordon Hayward is back. They could get Marcus Smart back. He had an eye infection, so he should return tonight. So they're basically going to have their full rotation. And Brad Stevens is going to be pumped up to go into Indiana, right? That's where he coached at Butler. So yeah, I mean, I think the tight spread, you got two defensive teams. It could come down to a final possession. So yeah, I think I'm going to lean on a team that has a guy like Kemba Walker as opposed to a team like the Pacers that really doesn't have a guy who can step up and take that sort of final shot in the final possession. So yeah, I think the Celtics will pull this one out.
All right, Nick, Ben is fading the Pacers win at home. What about you?
I'm doing the same. I think the Celtics win this game. I'm a little bit concerned because Marcus Smart sounds like he might end up being the game-time call. But they have Gordon Hayward back. I think that's big. Got him back on Monday. He looked pretty good against what's a pretty hapless Cavaliers team. Of course, this will be a tougher test, but Like Ben said, I mean, the Celtics have struggled a little bit on the road. They're 17-5. All 5 of those losses have come on the road, but I think they are able to buck that trend tonight. They're up to a top 5 defense and a top 10 offense. I think the size of Indiana, with Sabonis and Turner against a Boston team that is really not settled on a starting center is a little bit of a concern, but I mean, it hasn't really mattered. As I've said on this show all year, I mean, Boston looks like they're back to playing Celtics basketball, whatever that means. They weren't playing it last year. But for them to be 17-5, absorb some of the injuries that they've had early on, it's really tough to pick against them. So I'll side with the Celtics.
Nick, you mentioned a hapless Cavaliers team. Well, Houston at Cleveland, Rockets favored by 11.5. Nick, are you going to chase or fade that they cover that spread?
I'm going to say they cover. I don't have much to say about this one. I mean, Cleveland is a complete mess. Houston has shown that it's prone to allowing bad teams to stay in games, maybe not closing out games that teams with their record typically would. I wouldn't be surprised if they let Cleveland hang around, but this Cavs team is just not good right now. They had a couple of nice wins, surprising wins early on, but the wheels have completely fallen off. You have multiple veterans that want off this team. You have a top 5 pick who's been a disaster so far. You have last year's lottery pick who can't pass the ball. Like I said, I think they will hang around in the first half, but I think Houston pulls away and makes this a pretty easy double-digit win.
Ben, do you have to chase the Rockets covering that 11.5 point spread?
Yeah, I agree with Nick here. Again, I didn't have much to say here either. I mean, the Cavs are awful. They've lost 7 in a row. 3 of those 4 losses have come by 20-plus points. Again, they're facing James Harden. This seems like a spot where James Harden should be able to beat the Cavs in the first half. And then, I mean, Russell Westbrook could come in and put up 40 points on the Cavs. All these Kevin Love trade rumors have really put a cloud over Cleveland again, and I think they're just headed towards that sort of post LeBron again phase 2 where they just can't really get out of the basement of the NBA. So yeah, I mean they're in trouble. I think the Rockets can easily cover the spread.
Finally, New Orleans at Milwaukee has the highest total on the slate tonight. Ben, chase or fade? They go over 235.
Yeah, I sort of got baited into this with Wizards Hornets yesterday as the highest total, and that sort of burned me. But I'm going to chase this again. I'm going to say that it goes over, mostly because I think the Bucks could score upwards of 140 or 150 points just because of how awful the Pelicans are defensively. New Orleans may get Derek Favors back. He's been out due to personal reasons for the last couple weeks, so that will help on the interior. But, I mean, still, Milwaukee's won 15 games in a row. They're probably going to win 16 games in a row. They're at home. The Bucks against bad teams recently, 127 points against the Pistons, 132 against the Knicks, 137 against the Hornets. The Pelicans are a top 5 team in terms of pace of play. So yeah, I mean, I think everything's sort of lining up for the Bucks to really just stick it to the Pelicans tonight. And if they get to 130 points, I think the over should hit.
I mean, Nick, Ben has me convinced it's going over 235. What do you think?
I agree with all the points he made about Milwaukee. I mean, this could be a game where they, get well into the 120s, even the 130s. But I guess I'll play devil's advocate and say under, just because I don't know that New Orleans will be able to hold up its end of the bargain. The Bucks are the top defense in the league, in addition to being the number 2 offense heading into tonight. Like I said, they struggled a little bit the other night against Orlando. I think this is a good spot for them to bounce back and then maybe hit some more shots that weren't falling on Monday. But when you look at that Dallas game that Ben mentioned, I mean, Dallas got to 130, but New Orleans only got to 84 in that game. And, I think that probably doesn't happen again. They're probably closer to 100, but in the event that the Bucks don't get to 140 or even 130, I have some serious questions about whether the Pelicans will be able to score with what's been, the first or second best defensive team in the league all year. So I will say under, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I mean, I can't imagine New Orleans winning this game, but I mean, if they do end up losing by 30, 35 points, getting blown out again, you do have to wonder, I mean, maybe this is the straw that kind of breaks the camel's back when it comes to Alvin Gentry's job status. I mean, this would be 10 straight losses for New Orleans, a team that I think had an over-under of 37.5 coming into the year, and obviously has been just as disappointing as anyone in the league.
All right, thanks, guys. Jeff will join me to talk golf after Pat Mayo gives the President's Cup breakdown.
DraftKings captain's picks and bets. So DraftKings strategy, I don't know what the ideal strategy is here. But taking more Americans than Euros is probably the move because they're probably going to win, being minus 400 favorites. I'm just going to pick the U.S. to win straight up. I'm not going to bet on that because I don't want to lay minus 400 or minus 275 with the tie, and I still don't want to do that. So I will bet Louis plus 650 to be top international. I will bet him 18-1 to be the outright winner in points at the international team. But I do want to, if you realistically, you should probably wait till 6 a.m. or 3 p.m. on Wednesday is when it starts.
So around 1 or 2.
1 or 2.
Earlier, we'll have the...
Yeah, once they announce the teams is when you should really think about it. Objectively, I like Louis and I like Justin Thomas as my 2 captains picks. I think that Bryson or Webb are sneaky if they play together, making one of those 2 guys your captain's pick. And if Answer plays with Louis, Answer could be that guy.
I would like to let you know that those teams are going to be decided because the matches are 8 in the morning their time, Pat.
The day before.
The night before is when we're going to have the matches out there.
Okay.
So we will see that. I'm with you on Louis. I think that's a great bet. I see Mr. Cooley is also touting it. He's picking the win.
He's picking
He's picking the win.
Oh, Ben. Ben's riding too much of a heater. Ben's had too many winners over the past month now that we've gone back to Europe. Pump the brakes on the Euros.
Oh, that's bold. Full marks.
Oh, it's CT Pan versus Tiger Woods in the singles.
He's putting a lot of air in Louis like we are, and Adam Scott. Wow. Okay, so I'm on that Louis bet. I'm also I'm sneaky going to find my way. I think Tony Finau at 16-1.
I'd rather Woodland.
And Woodland at 12-1 are sneaky American team leader bets. And if Woodland whoever is getting that Justin Thomas draw, unless it's Tiger Woods, because we know Tiger won't session out.
Yeah.
If it is a Woodland, then get on that.
Yeah, don't construct any DraftKings lineups until you know what the first day teams are, and only take players from those things because they could play all 5 sessions.
So I guess
if guys are sitting out the first session, that's not going to say they're not going to play the next 4. They could, but they're not going to get 5. Just having an extra match in this sort of thing is so valuable.
And don't you want to just take the chance and double up on teammates?
Yes.
You got to roll the dice. You're going to live and die with
stacking,
that team.
Golf stacking.
You got to hope they win 6 and 5, 4 and 3. You get those. You get the.
The move may be. Let's say you see, and this is a theoretical because it probably won't happen. But if you see that Kuchar is paired with Justin Thomas, and that is the team on day 1, that is not going to be the team. But let's say it is. If you play multiple DraftKings lineups and you want to use JT as your captain, but he's too expensive, just use whoever JT's partner is as the captain. And that way you get off a bunch of ownership. In that way, it's like with Louis. If Louis is your guy, whoever is
he's my captain. He would be my captain.
But if you want to play 5 lineups or 10 lineups or something, maybe you construct a few teams with whoever his partner is as your captain from day 1 and go on from there. That's just different ways you can differentiate your team because there is some strategy, just like in the match play, not picking 6 guys from the same side of the bracket. You know what I mean? Finding player minutes remaining is going to be so key in this that you're gonna want to wait.
DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich is here. Jeff, need you to play a little game of price check with me. So are the following golfers priced right for the President's Cup? We start with Xander Schauffele. First time at the event, the second highest priced guy at $15,300. Is he worth paying up for?
Yeah, he's probably a little bit overpriced in my eyes. There's a couple reasons why I think that. He's a rookie, so it's always a little bit of a question mark coming into your first big international competition. I know they're big favorites, the Americans, but the second reason is he's paired with Patrick Cantlay right off the bat, which I don't necessarily love. Cantlay hasn't played a ton over the fall. He didn't really look good in his last time out, and you kind of wonder how this pairing might start off with 2 young guys, not a ton of international experience. So realistically, I'm looking at Schauffele's price. You can just pay up a little bit more to get to Justin Thomas, or you can pay down to a veteran like Webb Simpson or go on the other side to Lou Oosthuizen. I think Schauffele is a little bit overpriced. I do like him as a player a lot. I just feel like maybe the pairing is a little bit suspect. We'll have to see. And again, I just feel like there's better options essentially for that much.
All right, hometown boy Mark Leishman will cost you $9,300. Are you giving the Aussie any love here?
Yeah, so Mark Leishman I do like. He's an Aussie. He's going to have the hometown fans on his side. The problem with Leishman for DFS, and he's basically become essentially a huge boomer bust pick. He's paired with Joaquin Niemann in the first match for 4 balls, which is fine. But he's going up against the American juggernaut team of Justin Thomas and Tiger Woods. They're massive underdogs, like plus 200 or more underdogs here. So that is troublesome because you're looking at taking an L right off the bat. Now, on the flip side of that, if this Leishman-Niemann pairing does end up getting the win over Woods and Thomas, you might be looking at Mark Leishman just running the table, because can't even imagine how much confidence he would have after getting a win over a Woods and Thomas pairing in his home country event, right? So there is a lot of boom or bust potential with Mark Leishman. It's just that the bust factor is very high, because if they do lose that first match, and look, it's likely they will, then you're taking an L off the bat. And again, it could snowball from there to more losses. I kind of like it in GPPs. I don't think anyone's going to play Mark Leishman now, and he's really cheap. And I do think that they're live underdogs, but again, you have to consider the risk here. Obviously, if you're constructing a cash game lineup, you don't want him.
All right, Jeff, Sungjae Im making his first appearance at the President's Cup. A young guy with potential to play every session. Do you like him at the price of 8,400?
I kind of do. I mentioned that the Schauffele-Cantlay pairing that I'm not 100% sold on yet, and they're going up against Adam Hadwin and Sungjae Im in the first match, and I really feel like Im and Hadwin have a much better shot of taking the W here. They're pretty big underdogs too, but again, they're not going up against two experienced international Americans here. They're going up against kind of essentially two rookies, a guy in Cantlay who's not coming in with great form. Im has been red hot over the fall. He's been playing a ton, picked up a win in the Asian Tour, multiple top fives on the PGA, and Hadwin's been playing well too in that regard. He's played a lot over the fall, showed some great strokes gain approach. So his partner right off the bat looks solid. Im is a guy who plays a lot. He's going to be used to this kind of pressure. I like it. I think Sungjae Im, again, is trending more as just like a GPP play, and I don't think you need to captain him necessarily, but I think he could have a big President's Cup. He's a really young guy, but he's played a ton over his career. I think he's going to do well in this format.
Back to the Americans here. Gary Woodland finished in the top 10 at the Hero World Challenge last week, but he's 9,900. I mean, is that a little bit too pricey for him?
It's setting up possibly as too pricey. Woodland is it's interesting. Most of the Americans look like more solid plays, obviously because they're heavy favorites coming in. They have more talent, but Woodland is paired with Dustin Johnson, who's, again, coming off the knee surgery. It might end up being Tiger Woods just decides to rest that team on day 2 to give Johnson a rest, and then Woodland might have to take a rest with him, which would suck for your DraftKings lineups, because then you're missing a match with Woodland. And the other side of this is he's going up against Abraham Ancer and Louis Oosthuizen, arguably one of the strongest international pairings. Oosthuizen's a fantastic match player. I really like this setup. Ancer's a guy who won in Australia last year too, so I think that's going to be a really tough pairing for the Americans to overcome. Personally, we don't know what form Dustin Johnson is in. It's just a tough overall situation for Woodland. Again, GPPs, sure, you can consider them, but I would personally stay away from Woodland at this price. There's just better values out there. You can go down to Webb Simpson or even Tony Finau.
All right, this is a guy you mentioned down towards the bottom, Adam Hadwin, who literally said, I'm sure it would make me poop myself if he were to be matched up against Tiger Woods. Now, he didn't get matched up against Tiger Woods, but not much confidence here. He's only going to cost you $6,300. Sounds like you like him for that price.
Yeah, I know I do. I mean, look, it's probably a little bit of psychological warfare. You don't want to give Tiger, you don't want to be coming in hot like on my old fellow Canadian, Stephen Ames did about 20 years ago, and then he got blasted by Tiger Woods like in 9 holes in a match play competition. So Adam Hadwin is probably playing the smart move here from a psychological perspective. You know, you want to build up Tiger's ego a little bit, make him a little softer. He's getting soft in his old age, right? So I think Hadwin's played well in the fall. He like I said, he was off the charts in strokes gained approach in a lot of his starts. He's got a good partner in Sungjae Im. I really like that pairing. The only issue with Hadwin is he's not guaranteed to play in 5 matches. So there is a possibility, especially if that grouping loses off the bat, then you could see Hadwin sit, and then you'll really be down in points. So he's very much a boomer bust value pick. Again, not guy you go heavy on, but you're sprinkling in GPP lineups. Yeah, absolutely. The Im Hadwin pairing, very cost effective, and I like it. I think they could be in for a big week. It's just they're going up against the Americans, so nothing's guaranteed.
Little reverse psychology on Tiger. All right, real quick, slate approved pick.
Yeah, I'll go with my guy, Louis Oosthuizen, and I wrote him up in all my articles this week. He's just a fantastic value for your captain's play. He's a great match play player. He's led the internationals in scoring the last 2 President's Cups. He's in for a big week.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Hockey's next.
It's Brendan Glasheen and with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. Since they just signed Steven Strasburg to a boatload of money, you'd think the Nationals are basically done making major moves this winter. Hold the phone. The reigning World Series champions have reportedly made an initial inquiry to the Cubs about trading for Chris Bryant. MLB.com's John Morosi had that. The Nats have a void to fill at third base, and re-signing MVP finalist Anthony Rendon seems unlikely because the contract he'll command. Remember, team owner Mark Lerner is on record. The franchise can't afford Strasburg and Rendon. The 31-year-old Strasburg just got the richest pitching contract in baseball history. As for Bryant, Morosi reports the 2016 NL MVP is among the top position players that is a trade candidate in baseball this winter. This is an added layer to what Ken Rosenthal reported Monday. Bryant's market hinges on two factors. Teams in the third base market are likely to wait until after Rendon and Josh Donaldson sign free agent contracts before making their best offers to the Cubs. And number two, the lack of resolution on Bryant's service time grievance has created uncertainty in his value. So, interested teams need to find out, I'm sure Bryant would too, if Bryant becomes a free agent at the end of the upcoming season, 2020, or after the 2021 season. There should be clarity on that in the next couple of weeks. Point is, Bryant's time in Chicago may be dwindling.
Let's put this show on ice and take a look at tonight's three-game hockey slate with Chris Wassel of awesomeo.com. Chris, this is NHL Splurge or Save. Need to know if you're paying up for these players or saving some cash with a cheaper option. We begin at center. Nathan MacKinnon has been hot, averaging 20-plus fantasy points over his last 10 games. Are you paying up for him at 7,600 against Philly or saving money with another center?
Okay, this is where it gets fun tonight. Now, look, McKinnon, solid point production, like you said, just about 20 DK points over the last 10 games, but over the last three, that number has dropped in half. So you have to sit there and take this with a grain of salt a little bit. Do I want to spend up or do I want to go down and slide down a little bit to say maybe a Jean-Gabriel Pageau is playing his absolute favorite team to go up against in the Montreal Canadiens tonight. Look, the Montreal Canadiens are a team that will give up 3+ goals. They will give up 30+ shots with ease. And for some reason, Pageau has some magical effect against Montreal where he averages a little more a point a game. And he already has a goal on 4 shots in one meeting against them this year, along with hitting a post and a crossbar in the same game. So for 5,500, it might be worth it to go down a little bit and take a guy like Pageau.
All right, David Pastrnak is the second highest priced winger at 7,600, taking on the Caps. Do you like spending up for him or maybe saving a little for Brendan Gallagher, who's 6,200 against Ottawa?
This is the same kind of and rationale here, where you want to sit there and go, short slate, and Brendan Gallagher is a type of winger that will generate a lot of shots on occasion. Up until the other night, his previous 3 games before, he had 16 shots on goal, and he had goals in each game. So this is, again, a good matchup. He matches up well against Ottawa, and it's looking like that Montreal-Ottawa game could be the matchup of the night when it comes to goal scoring. So saving a little bit of money there, $1,400 is sizable and big on a night like this.
All right, John Carlson has been a stud on the blue line this season, and naturally he's the highest priced defenseman at 7,200. Do you need Carlson in your lineups, or can you give us a cheaper option?
You need Carlson in the lineup tonight. That's the one exception to every rule. In doubt, play John Carlson. And it seems like every time you go to doubt the guy comes up, and I remember this last week against the Kings. He scores 2 goals in the first period, and right away there's your exceeding value by leaps and bounds. And this is a guy that regularly hits the shot and block bonus on occasion. He manages to find a way to get points where you don't expect. He leads the league among defensemen in points. You can't go too wrong here. Now, if there was a play that you could piggyback off of this, it may be Torrey Krug, just because, well, Boston's power play 1 is finally fully healthy and could perhaps net a goal or 2 tonight, even against the Capitals.
All right, Chris, just to confirm goalies as of now, Carter Hart will cost you $7,400 against Colorado, while Anders Nilsson is $7K against Montreal. Would you take one of those cheap options or pay up for a better matchup?
For me, it's rough because when you're looking at this, you only have one other matchup after this. So that's that Boston-Washington matchup, which you're really not sure of either way, to be honest. So if there's one, it may just be Carter Hart. You're hoping and banking on that Colorado can somehow manage to get above the 30-shot mark to make this more of a worthwhile play. Philly only averages 28.7 shots allowed, which is third least in the league. A lot of people don't know that. At 5-on-5, Philly's extremely stingy on defense when it comes to allowing scoring chances and shots. But he's a better choice than Anders Nilsson, which would be a total crapshoot in a Ottawa-Montreal game where you don't know how many goals are going to come.
All right, Chris, the moment we've all been waiting for, slate approved pick time. Who is your lock on tonight's 3-game slate?
Slate proof lock. Gotta go with this one. I can't believe it. We're going with a mid-tiered option for a lock tonight. Yep, we're going Jean-Gabriel Pageau. Until Montreal can find a way to stop this guy on a nightly basis. I've joked that he should sign in Montreal or be traded to Montreal at some point, because that may be the only way Marc Bergevin can stop having nightmares about the center. As a matter of fact, the entire Ottawa first line may be something you want to consider stacking tonight in your GPP lineups, because one, they're reasonably priced, and two, they play extremely well against Montreal, averaging 4.5 real-time points per game.
I love it. A little stack advice with your slate approved pick. Awesome stuff, Chris. As always, one more go around with our NFL panel is next after the latest from Pat Mayo.
Quarterback rankings for week 15. Likely in, Patrick Mahomes with his hand. Likely in, Jameis Winston with his hand. Likely out, Daniel Jones with his ankle. And Matt Stafford. I'm starting to doubt we're going to see Matt Stafford again this season. But number one in the ranks, 15-point favorite at home Thursday night, Lamar Jackson. He's got to be one, right?
Shocker.
I know.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. No, bench Lamar Jackson. Jets are too good. The Jets' run defense is so good, they'll stop Lamar. Deshaun at number 2, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Jameis, Tannehill at 6, Breeze, Kyler, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Dak Prescott inside the top 10. We always disagree the most at quarterback rankings, but you know what? You should have copied my rankings from last week. I think I was the only person who had Breeze inside the top 5.
I think you were, so kudos to that.
Pat Mayo knows things.
Pat Mayo knows Drew Brees.
Spoiler alert. I get one of every 20 calls right. Ba-boom. That was the one.
Were you really on the 5-touchdown game, though?
I mean, I thought he'd have a good game. Like, I saw a lot of people, benched him for, absolute duds.
I don't know if there was duds. I know I had one, somebody was asking me, benched him. I'm trying to think who he benched him for. Somebody who had a good game. That was the thing. It's there's a lot of players that actually had, I'm looking at the list right now, I'm trying to figure out. Oh, Sam Darnold, who actually had a respectable game. But there was a Sam Darnold. I know some people benched him for Ryan Tannehill, who had a good game. So some of the people who he benched for wasn't so bad. It was the problem if you benched him for one of the worst options, which I think there was Josh Allen was that one made no sense to me, but Josh Allen and Tom Brady and Gardner Minshew, if you did any of those, that definitely hurt.
Yeah, the biggest one I had, if I'm going to pat myself on the back, Barry Horowitz style, about having Breeze at 4, I had Cousins at number 3, and he was useless.
Oh, yeah, that was another one somebody asked about. So, yeah, I think it was about 50-50. It worked out for some, worked out for not others. Nobody expected that to happen, and he just threw the tight ends all damn day.
Yeah. Did you see anything inside that top 10, someone who should be out of the top 10, someone who should move inside the top 10 at quarterback this week?
I think, Fitzpatrick is a little bit aggressive. I don't mind it. It's a great matchup, but, that's going to be a game where...
Listen, man, they can't settle for 8 field goals again. You turn 2 of those into touchdowns, and he scores 30 points.
No, so where I'm going is something we talked about sneaky-wise for playoff defenses is the Giants' defense. They do play a quality defense, as you just saw against the Eagles. Granted, that was a sloppy game because of the weather on top of it, but for the majority of the game until overtime in the last part of the fourth quarter, they were pretty much in control. And I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen against the Dolphins. And Fitzpatrick's not going to be afraid to throw. What I'm saying is if this game turns out like that game, I don't think that Fitzpatrick is throwing 250, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, I feel like this could turn into a 13-10 nonsense game that nobody wants to watch. And that's my only concern about Fitzpatrick. Look, I don't hate the play. I just feel like I'm looking at a couple, like, did you have Garoppolo in front of him? Because I would go Garoppolo against the Falcons before Fitzpatrick. I would probably, I just trust Aaron Rodgers more. I don't hate it, but you asked me the question. That's where I would go different.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Fitzpatrick here. Like I said, he was just off of having a big game. He does bring rushing ability to the table, although he goes big rushing week, no rushing week, big rushing week, no rushing week. He just had a big rushing week, so maybe you don't see it here. But the one good thing about Fitzpatrick versus a lot of these other guys for their fantasy upside, like Garoppolo, yeah, we all know that Garoppolo is a better quarterback than Ryan Fitzpatrick, and the matchup is pretty good against Atlanta. But San Francisco is so good, they might get up by a bunch here or just be able to run the ball the entire game. The fun thing about the Dolphins is they can't run the ball, so they barely even try. They just throw, and that's exactly really what you want to be doing against the Giants.
Welcome back to Jeff Ulrich and Steve Buchanan. Who's up for a little NFL over-under? Good, because you don't have a choice. So, will the following players go over or under their fantasy point averages in Week 15? So, Baker Mayfield has been bad, but a matchup with Arizona could be a cure-all. Jeff, does he go over or under 15.8?
Probably does. I mean, just on volume alone, like playing the fastest-paced team, and they were one of the fastest-paced teams in the league, the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, they just give up a ton of yards outside of Duck Hodges last week, who still put up a respectable game. I mean, the 4 quarterbacks before that all hit over 300 yards. And I know the Cleveland Browns don't throw a ton either. I mean, Baker's coming in with under 200 yards in 4 of his last 7 games. But again, it's just a volume thing. You've got to figure like Odell Beckham or Jarvis Landry or even David Njoku is going to get a little bit free in this game and just rack up some catches and yards for Baker. So if he only throws for like 250, he's probably going to put the ball in the end zone at least once. Maybe rack up a couple rushing yards. Like, it's very hard. It's going to be hard for him to hit the under here is basically what I'm trying to say. So I don't necessarily love his price on DraftKings, but yeah, he's going to go over this, I think.
Steve, do you agree with Jeff on this one?
I mean, I agree with everything except that Hodges had a respectable game. You go and face the Cardinals and you can't even get off like 200 yards? That was an awful performance. Like,
I had low expectations for Duck Hodges. Let's put it that way, Steve. I had like 99 yards in my estimation.
Fine. That's fair then. But, like Jeff said, before that, 5 straight games of over 317 plus passing yards. 3 of those games had over 3 touchdowns thrown. Like, I'm surprised that so many people don't want to play Baker Mayfield against an Arizona team that's given up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks and tight ends, the 2nd most to wide receivers, and the 11th most to running backs. Like, the Browns should absolutely feast in this matchup, so don't worry about Baker this week. He should be absolutely fine.
Christian McCaffrey is back down to 10K this week. First time since week 9. He'll be back home against Seattle, over or under his average of 30.7 fantasy points, Steve.
So, I'm not going to be that guy that says, Christian McCaffrey's going to go under his total fantasy point average because he basically does it every single week going over that mark. But you look at what the Seattle run defense has done, and they don't really necessarily get burned on the ground. They've only allowed over 100 rushing yards twice this season. Where they really get burned is through the air, allowing about 50 yards per game. And you got the Panthers as as underdogs this one by 6 points, so there could be opportunities there for McCaffrey to get some of those PPR points. But this is kind of, I think, of a tougher matchup than people are giving it credit for. So I'm not crazy about the total. I'm not sold that he's going to go under here, but I think this is actually a tougher matchup than people are giving it credit for.
Jeff, do you think he's going over or under 30.7 fantasy points?
I do think he's going over. Look, the Seattle rush defense hasn't really been that good lately. I mean, last week they got gashed pretty good by Todd Gurley. They actually could have gotten gashed more if Jared Goff hasn't been throwing INTs all in the second half there. I think Gurley could have easily gone over like 150 total yards. And look, they're giving up the 4th most touchdowns to running backs, the 6th most passing yards to running backs, 4.6 yards per carry now they're up to defensively. Like, that's not good. Christian McCaffrey burned this team for almost 250 total yards last year, a couple touchdowns, like 1 through the air, 1 on the ground. I think this is a big bounce back spot. This is part of the reason why I'm kind of wary of taking Seattle to cover in the spot. I really do feel like at home, Christian McCaffrey could get off in the spot, make this a closer game than it's supposed to be. I like him this week. I think he is going to go over his average here.
All right. I mean, we'll see what happens. Chris Carson in a great matchup against Carolina, though. No Rashad Penny either. He's been averaging 16.8 fantasy points per game. Jeff, over or under that mark?
I mean, without Rashad Penny there, you got to go over. I mean, you got a team with Seattle who loves to run the ball. You've got to figure that all the opportunity now is going to Chris Carson, who the Seahawks liked before anyways. So really the only thing that's probably going to stop him here is some fumbling issues. But again, Seattle doesn't have an option to go against Chris Carson. There's no doghouse for Chris Carson this week because his backup is gone now. So he also has a fantastic matchup, which I'm sure Steve is probably going to hit on. He already kind of hit on earlier in the show. But I mean, the Carolina Panthers rush defense, not exactly the greatest in the world. I mean, they made the Washington Redskins look like, the 1980, 1990 Dallas Cowboys there a couple weeks ago. So I like the spot for Carson. I think 16.8 is more than doable. Yeah, I'll take the over here too.
Steve, is this an easy over for you?
He would literally have to get injured for him to not go over this total for me. Like, the Carolina run defense has been bad, but it has been particularly bad over the past 5 weeks. An average of 145 rushing yards allowed in that span, 10 touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns as well. Like, they have just been gashed on the ground. And now you have Chris Carson, who, like Jeff said, doesn't have anybody behind him. Like, there's no benching Carson if he fumbles the ball or whatever. They really don't have anybody else to go in and take over this role. So this should be an easy over for Carson. Like, he's one of my favorite plays now on the week to lock in at the running back position. I feel like he's somebody you need to have in your lineups this week, especially with Seattle being favored as much as they are at -6. So yeah, you have to lock in Carson, and I'd be honestly shocked if he didn't go over this total.
Kenny Golladay has found the end zone 2 weeks in a row. He'll play the Bucks this week. Steve, will he go over or under his 17.5 average?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is that Marvin Jones Jr. is now on the IR. So it's, Golladay was always the #1 option in this of all these receivers, but now it's just kind of solidified now. Jones hasn't been off the field much, but when he's been off, Golladay has a 32% target share, a 22.3 ADOT, which is just absolutely insane, and a 32% red zone target share. That's all with Marvin Jones off of the field. Now he's going against literally one of the worst secondaries in the league against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, this is a huge spot for Golladay to really kind of rake in those fantasy points. Again, somebody I think you have to have in your lineup this week. So yes, by far, he should definitely be going over this total.
Jeff, do you agree he's definitely going over?
Yeah, I hate to go over in all these spots, but I do like the over here too. I mean, look, with David Blau, Kenny Golladay has gone 13 targets, 10 receptions, 216 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, he's doing pretty good. He burned a pretty weak secondary last week. He's going up against arguably an even worse secondary in this spot. Detroit Lions defense can't stop anything either. So, I mean, Blau's going to have basically had no choice but to keep chucking the ball downfield to Golladay. Very good matchup to overcome. I think the only thing that would stop him here is if Marvin Jones went off or something. He got all the touchdowns, but I don't think that's necessarily like a guarantee. I like the over here with Golladay. I wouldn't be shocked if he found the end zone again.
George Kittle at home against Atlanta, over or under his average of 15.2 fantasy points, Jeff?
I'm going to take the under here, and it's not a talent or a matchup thing. It's just based on, I feel like the San Francisco 49ers can beat the Falcons in so many different ways. Defense, running, Jimmy Garoppolo throwing to Emmanuel Sanders, that I'll take the under here just because in these blowout games, it's always a little bit dicey as to which players are going to get the ball. And I mean, Kittle would basically have to put up, 80 plus yards or find the end zone here to go over. So just on a volume perspective and a game flow perspective, we could see more running here from San Francisco, such big favorites. I'll take the under.
Steve, you want to take the under too?
Yeah, Jeff got a good rest yesterday. He's been pretty on point with his points, so I have to agree with him here too as well. I mean, I'm not crazy about Kittle in this matchup here. The Falcons have been about league average against tight ends, allow about 11 DraftKings fantasy points, 50 receiving yards. It's not like a huge spot for George Kittle. I don't feel it's necessary that you have to pay up for him in this game either. So 15.2 is a lot to ask against a pretty mediocre matchup at best here. So not crazy about it, so I think he goes under.
All right, thanks, guys.
Great. I did have a great sleep last night, by the way.
Yeah,
great sleep.
Fantastic.
So well rested,
so happy
Jeff.
for you.
That's amazing. I'm glad we're all well rested. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Before we wrap up with NBA Showdown picks, let's flash back to yesterday and Ben Zwyman's take on Carmelo Anthony.
I'm looking to roster Melo tonight. A lot of people ignore the narrative for the NBA. I think it's very, very much in play. I think this is definitely a game where Melo is going to want to show up. Again, the Knicks aren't a great defensive team. They sort of have guys that big bodies that they can throw at him, and Marcus Morris and Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson. But I don't think that'll matter. I think Melo's a gamer. He's going to want to show up. I'm liking him in the showdown contest. I like him a little bit more on the 4-game slate. He's a little cheaper at 5,600. But yeah, I'm digging the narrative here. I think Melo gets to like 20 plus points. I think they're going to sort of force feed him the ball. If the Blazers end up pulling away, I think this is a scenario where they're just going to leave Melo in the game and just keep letting him chuck. So yeah, I like the Melo narrative tonight.
Well, if you listen to Ben, you reaped the benefit. 16 points, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, 27 fantasy points for Melo, and he's here for his victory lap. Ben Zwyman, NBA editor for DK Nation, alongside RotoWire's Nick Whalen. I mean, Ben, anything to say?
I mean, I don't know if I should be taking a victory. I thought Melo would have a way better game than that. I was a little surprised the Knicks got blown out. I think they would have shown up a little more. But I did have a lot of Damian Lillard last night, and he showed up, and that was a pretty easy spot. He hit 8 threes. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy about Dame, not so much about Melo.
I mean, Melo still had a good night. So let's see if you can repeat the magic with your picks for the Clippers-Raptors showdown contest. I mean, welcome to Narrative Street. It's Kawhi's return to Toronto. Any chance he's your captain, Ben?
No. I've been playing around with this a little bit. At first, I wanted to pay down at captain and sort of fit in a lot of the studs because I think this game's going to be close, and I think both rotations are going to be tight. So you're going to see a lot of the star players and the starters play the majority of the minutes. But Lou Williams actually isn't a starter, but he should play a lot of the minutes off the bench, and he's a guy that I like a lot at 11,100. He's kind of been cold lately. I think he's due for a breakout. Fred VanVleet's probably going to be out tonight for the Raptors. Kyle Lowry is sort of working his way back from injury. Nick talked a little bit about that in our first segment. So yeah, I think Lou Williams is in a good spot to bounce back. He's got a high ceiling. He's going to save you a little bit of salary as opposed to paying up for some of those other studs like Kawhi and Paul George and Pascal Siakam at captain. And I think he'll differentiate your lineup a little bit. So even fitting in Lou Will, you can sort of get in some more of those studs and maybe find a value and still have a pretty good lineup going. So I like Lou Will.
Nick, how are you going about captaining your player?
I like all the logic there that Ben laid out. I'll pay up even a little bit more and make a case for Paul George. I think all the attention, of course, will be on Kawhi tonight, but I think Paul George, excuse me, especially when those two have been on the court together, has oftentimes been the aggressor, the more effective scorer. He's coming off of a 36-point game the other night against Indiana. Kawhi, of course, also played well in that game. But, I mean, since Paul George has really kind of come into his own after missing time early on, he's taking over 10 threes a game since returning. He can get hot on just about any night. It's obvious that I think playing alongside Kawhi Leonard has opened things up for him to a degree that he's never seen before in his career. I mean, he never had that kind of talent around him in Indiana. He had Russell Westbrook in OKC, but I don't think Westbrook really opened things up in the same way that someone like Kawhi does. And it just seems like things are coming easy to Paul George this season, or at least easier than they have in the past. And on top of the scoring, I mean, he's a guy who gives you assists, rebounds. The Raptors are not a good rebounding team. And he gives you defensive numbers. Not a ton of blocks, but he does have 6 steals over his last 2 games alone.
Nick, who are you stacking with Paul George?
I'm going to stack Montrezl Harrell, another guy you kind of have to pay up for, 8,400 tonight. I mean, I've been blown away by him, not only last season, but this season. I mean, taking things even to another level, averaging just under 20 points per game for a guy who, coming out of Louisville was kind of looked at as, a borderline roster type of player. 19 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, over 1 block per game. Just an incredible rise that he's had over the last couple of years. But looking at this game specifically, I mean, the Clippers are the best offensive rebounding team in terms of offensive rebound percentage in the NBA, basically solely because of Montrezl Harrell. And the Toronto Raptors, I was surprised to see this, the second worst defensive rebounding team in terms of defensive rebounding percentage in the NBA. That number is kind of all I needed to see. I think this is a night where even if Harrell's not scoring all that much, even if it's a little more lower scoring than we're expecting, he can make up that value on the glass.
All right, Ben, who are you stacking with your captain, Lou Williams?
Yeah, I mean, originally I was going to pay down at captain and sort of make it so my lineup would stack pretty much all of the studs, like Kawhi and Paul George and Pascal Siakam. But if I'm going with Lou Williams, I guess I like Pascal a little bit. I think he'll be lower owned at 14-7. Sort of differentiate yourself. If Lou Williams is chucking a lot, Pascal's probably going to be on the glass. Sure. Nick alluded to the Raptors not being a very good rebounding team. And of course, in the earlier matchup we saw, it was a very low scoring game, right? 98-88. So yeah, I think points will be scarce. I think rebounds will be scarce. But I think if anyone's buying into this sort of narrative where like with the Kawhi coming back sort of thing, I think Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam are the two guys that are going to want to sort of step up in this game. And I think both are going to play a ton of minutes. Pascal Siakam plays a ton of minutes. And he gets pretty good usage. So, yeah, I think Pascal Siakam's not a bad way to sort of differentiate your lineup along with Lou Williams.
Well, you didn't end up going cheap for captain, so where can we find some value tonight, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious spot is at Norman Powell, right? Like, if Fred VanVleet's out again, Powell's 6,400. He's probably going to start again, and he's going to play close to, 28, 30 minutes in this game. He played 28 minutes the other night, scored 17 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. Pretty good defender. He's usually good for a couple of steals per game. And this is a really low price if you're fitting him in at the flex spot. So I would just sort of monitor the news here. If Fred VanVleet's ruled out again, I would lean on Norman Powell. If Fred VanVleet comes back, I still kind of like Powell, but maybe I look at Serge Ibaka in this spot. I think he'll play a decent amount of minutes off the bench. So yeah, I think Powell's the guy if VanVleet's out.
Nick, hit us with some value, please.
Yeah, I mean, Ben said it. I think Norman Powell is the guy that I wanted to highlight as well, 6,400. I mean, he's a guy you could even justify slotting into your lineup if VanVleet plays. But if VanVleet does not play, I think if you really, really need to save cash, if you put Paul George in your captain spot and really need to save, you could pivot to Terrence Davis. He's down at $2,000. A guy that stepped up while Kyle Lowry was out, and in the absence of VanVleet, you would think would kind of fill a similar role. Maybe doesn't have the highest floor, but with Lowry out of the lineup, Davis did have a stretch where he averaged 11.2 points, 4.2 rebounds, 3.1 assists. Very efficient from the field, especially by guard standards. He was 50+% from the field, 44% from beyond the arc. So, not someone you'd feel super confident about, but for $2,000, if you absolutely need that spot and VanVleet's out, I think there are worse options.
Nick, who's someone in this game that you're totally fading tonight?
I've been basically fading Marc Gasol all season. He's at 6,800 tonight. I know he's been a little bit better of late. It kind of seems like that matchup against Joel Embiid last week kind of woke him up. But he's just been really disappointing and not somebody that you can really trust, I guess, night to night. Tough matchup against Montrezl Harrell, a physical big man that's, really just going to be relentless every single second that he's on the court. You have to be aware of where he is. He's going to be crashing the glass. That's a tough matchup. And then on top of Harrell, I mean, the guy who starts at center is someone who can match up with Gasol physically. And, we're seeing fewer and fewer of those type of centers in the NBA. But, Zubac is somebody that can kind of match the size that Marc Gasol has. So, I think Gasol's struggles are part of the reason that Toronto's not a great rebounding team this season. And, like I said, with the Clippers being the best offensive rebounding team in the league, I just think this is not a great spot for Gasol.
Ben, who's getting the fade from you?
Yeah, I know Nick said that he liked Harrell a lot. I actually think you can fade him here. I think it's going to be tough for him down low. The Raptors are really athletic. They have a lot of length with Serge Ibaka and Pascal Siakam. I think he's going to sort of have trouble. And plus, Harrell really hasn't been that great on the road. 16.6 points per game, 6.8 rebounds per game in 11 road games. So he's sort of not as good on the road. His price is pretty high in the flex at 8,400. So if you're trying to fit in, Kawhi, Paul George, Pascal, if you're trying to fit in a lot of those stud guys, it's going to be tough to do Harrell unless you're doing a very balanced lineup. So yeah, and plus, usually Harrell sort of steps up when Kawhi is resting. Normally he'll get more minutes off the bench when Kawhi is resting. I know that he usually plays in crunch time in that lineup, but I still think his value is higher when Kawhi is resting. So with Kawhi back, I'm not so crazy about Harrell. I think you can fade him tonight.
Speaking of, really quick here, Ben, what are your Kawhi expectations for tonight? His point total is set at 24.5. Do you think he goes over or under that?
Yeah, I know Nick and I talked a little bit about the Kawhi being modest and not really buying into the narrative too much. So I think he'll be excited to get his ring, excited to be back in Toronto, but he's pretty level-headed. But I still think he'll have a pretty good game, right? This should be a really competitive basketball game, playoff atmosphere kind of game. So yeah, I think Kawhi's got a shot at hitting that over of his point total. I don't know how crazy I would be about it, just because we've seen Paul George sort of be the aggressor on offense, and I think those two will play off of each other pretty well. But yeah, we could see this be a low-scoring game. So yeah, I'm not so sure I would attack that over/under. But yeah, I think Kawhi will do fine tonight.
Real quick, what do you think, Nick?
Same here. I mean, you look at his game against San Antonio last season, 21 points, 5 rebounds. He ended up losing that game. You know, like I said, I think Toronto or the Clippers win tonight. But I mean, Kawhi's Kawhi. I don't think he brings anything extra or anything less against Toronto. It's just another game for him.
All right, thanks, guys. That's a show. The Sweat is back tomorrow at 10 a.m.